They tried to humiliate you, to provoke you, to drag your name through the dirt and watch you react. But here's what they never expected: silence. Not because you're weak, but because you're dangerous. The kind of dangerous that doesn't yell, doesn't flinch, and doesn't need to fight to win. Because what if I told you that the most devastating way to destroy someone is to never touch them at all? No insults, no revenge plots, no public confrontation, just quiet strategic detachment so powerful that their world begins to collapse without you ever lifting a finger. This is not passive. It's psychological warfare. It's Machiavellian. And once you master it, you'll realize you don't need to crush your enemies. You only need to outgrow them. In this video, I'll show you how to make your silence louder than their lies, your presence sharper than their attacks, and your evolution, the very thing that ends them, not with noise, but with contrast, invisibility, and precision. Because the most feared man in the room isn't the one who fights, it's the one you offend once and never get a second chance with. Destruction doesn't always come wrapped in fire and fury. It doesn't need raised voices, courtroom drama, or vengeance soaked in spectacle. Sometimes the most devastating act of all is the one that looks like nothing at all. No screams, no public fallout, just quiet, cold, deliberate, unnerving silence. That's the kind of power Machiavelli understood better than anyone. Because true destruction, when done right, doesn't look like violence. It looks like absence. It looks like stillness so unwavering that it breaks the other person from the inside out. In a world where everyone is addicted to reaction, confrontation becomes a currency. The loudest voice, the strongest clapback, the most theatrical display of rage, these are mistaken for strength. But reaction is weakness in disguise. It means you've been pulled into their game, made to dance to their rhythm, trapped in a story you didn't write. The one who reacts is the one who loses control. Machiavellian wisdom teaches us, don't fight your enemy, watch them. Let them perform. Let them accuse, shout, provoke. And while they burn their energy trying to pull you into a fight, you stay calm, calculated, and unbothered. That's when the real shift begins. The crowd starts watching them unravel, not because you exposed them, but because you didn't need to. You gave them just enough space to self-destruct. Destruction in its purest form is not about aggression. It's about allowing the other person to collapse under the weight of their own instability. When someone tries to provoke you, and you don't flinch when they throw dirt, and you don't respond, you strip them of power. Their accusations begin to echo in empty rooms. Their attempts at control become comical. And their voice, once loud, begins to fade, not because you silenced them, but because you made them irrelevant. This is not weakness. This is war by silence. A strategy far more terrifying than shouting matches or personal attacks. Because once you've learned to destroy without confrontation, you become someone no enemy can touch, not because you fought harder, but because you never had to fight at all. Stillness is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is not surrender. Stillness, when understood and mastered, becomes one of the most terrifying forms of power a human being can possess. It confuses your enemies. It unsettles the room. It shifts energy without a word. And that's precisely why Machiavelli considered it a weapon, one sharper than any sword. In a confrontation, people expect noise. They expect defense. They want to see you flinch. They're begging for your reaction, not because they're powerful, but because they're starving. They want to feel important. They want to know they matter. So they provoke. They mock. They raise their voice. And they wait for you to strike back. But when you don't, when you hold the silence just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable, something breaks, and it's not you. You see, stillness isn't about doing nothing. It's about doing everything without being obvious. It's psychological dominance in its purest form. When you stand calm while someone tries to rattle you, you expose their desperation, their need to be seen, their fear of being irrelevant. Because the more they talk, the more they explain, the more they try to prove. The more obvious it becomes, they're losing control. The genius of stillness is that it gives you the upper hand without lifting a finger. You aren't defending yourself, you're allowing the enemy to destroy their own credibility. The longer they perform, the more the audience sees the cracks. The more they push, the more you become untouchable. You force them into a position where everything they do looks insecure, emotional, weak, while you look like the calm force no storm can shake. Machiavelli knew this real power doesn't scream. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It doesn't rise to every challenge. Real power sits, observes, smiles faintly, and lets the other person reveal who they truly are. So when someone insults you, looks for your reaction, tries to bait you, don't respond. Don't even blink. Just breathe. Hold the stillness. Let the silence hang. Let the pressure build. Because in that moment, you've already won. Not through defense, not through attack, but through the art of being completely unmoved. Sometimes the most devastating blow is not delivered through force, but through contrast. You don't need to argue. You don't need to prove. You don't even need to respond. Instead, you let the gap speak for you. The gap between who they say you are and who you calmly continue to be. That is the brilliance of Machiavellian contrast. When someone attacks you publicly, insults your character, questions your motives, mocks your presence, the average person retaliates. They get loud, defensive, emotional. And in doing so, they validate the very narrative they're trying to escape. But a master, he doesn't fight back. He elevates. He stays composed, focused, deliberate, while the enemy loses their mind trying to bring him down. Here's the strategy. Let them accuse you. Let them rant. Let them create stories about you, stories soaked in projection, insecurity, envy. And then, don't say a word. Say nothing. Let your existence become the contradiction. If they say you're arrogant, act with grace and clarity. If they say you're weak, move with unwavering strength. If they call you fake, show consistent character. The more you embody the opposite of their lies, the more the audience starts to question the source, not you, but them. This is the power of contrast. You don't have to deny their words. You simply let time, truth, and presence dissolve them. And the beauty is, it's quiet. It's surgical. It doesn't require a scene. You just live excellently, consistently, unbothered. And with every move you make, you peel their narrative apart without ever mentioning their name. This is where reputations collapse, not in battles, but in comparisons. When people see a calm, focused, stable individual continuing to rise while the accuser grows louder, more erratic, more desperate, the truth becomes self-evident. The louder they get, the smaller they look. The more they scream, the more people lean into your silence. Machiavelli never said to fight liars with more words. He said to let your actions become evidence. Because in the court of public perception, credibility is everything. And the person who needs to defend their power the loudest usually has the least of it. In the end, contrast is what wins. Not noise, not vengeance, just the quiet, steady unfolding of truth. Some enemies don't want to defeat you, they want to feed off you. They want your reaction, your anger, your validation. They want your energy because they have none of their own. That's why the greatest weapon you can use against them is not rage. It's not revenge. It's starvation. You starve them of the one thing they can't live without: attention. Attention is oxygen for the weak. It gives their slander power. It gives their gossip life. It makes their lies echo and their drama feel important. Without your energy, they wither. Without your name to lean on, they disappear. And that's what Machiavelli understood with cold precision. The moment you react, you become their fuel. But when you don't, when you withdraw completely, they begin to collapse from the inside out. This is how you destroy someone who wants to be seen. You make them invisible. You don't argue. You don't defend. You don't respond to their words or their games. Instead, you move forward. Publicly, privately, powerfully. You keep building. Keep growing. Keep showing up in rooms they can't even enter without ever mentioning their name. And the result? They begin to look smaller with every attempt. The more they speak about you, and the less you acknowledge them, the more obsessed and unstable they appear. People start to ask, why are they still talking about someone who doesn't even engage doubt forms? Their narrative unravels, and their credibility rots in the silence you've created. You don't have to tarnish their name, they'll do it for you. You just remove yourself. No drama, no announcement, no final message, just subtraction. And the more they try to provoke you back into orbit, the more the world sees what you've already known. They were never your equal, they were just a parasite. You become untouchable not because you fought harder, but because you became unreachable. That's the Machiavellian mastery. Let them chase your shadow until they collapse in exhaustion. And when they finally fall silent, it won't be because they've won. It'll be because you made them irrelevant. In the end, silence doesn't just protect your peace, it becomes the coffin for their relevance. Most people think power is loud, a show of dominance, a sharp retort, a public takedown. But Machiavelli knew the truth. Real power withdraws, not in defeat, but in strategy. And when done correctly, withdrawal is the most violent act you can commit without ever raising your voice. You don't need to announce it. You don't need a final word, a dramatic exit, or an emotional goodbye. You simply pull away your energy, your approval, your access. One thread at a time, you unravel the connection. Not to punish, but to expose. Because the moment you step back, the mask they wear begins to crack. Not because you said anything, but because you stopped saying everything. This is the power of subtraction. The silence that follows a withdrawal is louder than any confrontation. When you no longer invite them into important conversations, when your presence vanishes from their world, when your attention evaporates, they panic. They'll try harder to provoke you, to bait you, to win your reaction. But all they find is emptiness, no message, no response, no access. And this absence, it hurts more than an insult ever could. Because it forces them to face what they've tried to avoid, that their power came from proximity to yours, that their relevance was tied to your validation, that their ego was fed by your inclusion, and now without it, they're spinning in a room with no mirrors, shouting into a void that doesn't echo back. Machiavelli mastered this form of destruction, to never confront directly, but to make the absence of your presence a consequence so sharp it leaves scars. You don't tear them down, you disappear, and let them collapse in the silence. And as you rise quietly, calmly, consistently, their attempts to attack you start to look like desperation. This is not ghosting. This is strategic deletion. You are no longer in the room they once used to feed their identity. You're operating on a higher level now, one where their noise can't reach you. Because in the end, it's not the exit that hurts, it's the indifference. And when you remove your energy without warning or explanation, you don't just leave. You remind them that you were never dependent and they were never essential. In every conflict, there's something far more important than who speaks louder, who controls the frame. The frame is the invisible lens through which people perceive truth. It's not about facts, it's about impressions. And in Machiavelli's world, whoever owns the frame owns the war, no matter how many battles they appear to lose. When someone attacks you, mocks you, questions your intentions, the trap is set. The moment you respond, defend, clarify, or retaliate, you've stepped inside their frame. You've accepted their version of the story. And now, you're no longer in control. You're reacting, justifying, bleeding in public while they hold the pen. But the one who truly understands power never responds. Not because he's weak, but because he refuses to operate in someone else's reality. Machiavelli knew to control the frame, you must first master your presence. You do not defend. You do not flinch. You do not explain. Instead, you remain rooted, composed, and unbothered, while their performance begins to look exactly like what it is: insecurity dressed up as confidence. The beauty of controlling the frame is this: you don't have to say anything. Your calm demeanor, your refusal to engage, your focused movement forward, these things rewrite the narrative silently. When your body language remains stable while theirs becomes scattered, when your silence feels grounded while their voice becomes shrill, the room feels the shift. People begin to sense who holds the real power. They may not understand it consciously, but they feel it. because the one who looks least in control emotionally, psychologically, always loses in the court of perception. You don't win by out-arguing. You win by staying in a world they can't enter, the world of self-possession. You shift from being a player in their drama to being a force they can't provoke. And eventually, their attacks stop being viewed as truth and start being seen as noise. Control the frame and you control the story. Refuse to enter their world and you force them to exit yours. Because when you own the tone, the presence, the rhythm, they're not just losing influence. They're losing relevance. You don't need to destroy someone with your words. Let the crowd do it for you. That's the brilliance of Machiavelli's seventh principle. You don't need to fight, accuse, or explain. You simply let the truth unravel itself. Through contrast, through silence, through presence. When someone attacks you, spinning stories, poisoning your name, whispering behind your back, the instinct is to strike back, to shout the truth, to demand fairness. But the moment you do that, you shift the spotlight onto yourself. And now, you're part of the drama. You've been baited. The enemy wants you loud, defensive, agitated, because that's how they blur the line between strength and guilt. But Machiavelli's strategy is colder, cleaner. He knew that public perception doesn't respond to who's right. It responds to who looks in control. And the one who moves with poise, unbothered by noise, gains silent authority. So when lies circulate and rumors build, you don't chase them. You outlive them. You rise above them so consistently and so publicly that the story simply stops making sense. Let them rant. Let them exaggerate. Let them frame you with their insecurities. Meanwhile, you show up calm, composed, and competent. You speak clearly. You execute flawlessly. You move in alignment with truth, but you never mention the lie. That's what undoes them. Because now the observers begin to notice something strange. The story doesn't match the man. And when the public feels that disconnect between who you are and who they said you were, the liar collapses under their own fabrication. Their credibility dissolves not because you expose them, but because reality did. This is how you ruin someone without confrontation. You let time do the speaking. You let behavior become testimony. You let presence contradict everything they try to say. And the more they scream, the more foolish they look next to your silence. The crowd begins to shift, not because you manipulated them, but because you gave them nothing to resist. And in that vacuum, the only voice they hear is your quiet, powerful consistency. You never denied their words. You just made them irrelevant. There's a special kind of enemy, one that doesn't insult you, doesn't attack you publicly, but quietly tries to become you. They study your moves, mirror your tone, align with your style, not because they respect you, but because they have no identity of their own. And this is where most people falter. They feel invaded, threatened, even enraged by the copycat. But Machiavelli saw it differently. Imitation isn't flattery, it's admission. It's proof that your blueprint is stronger than anything they could build themselves. So don't waste your breath trying to call them out. Don't lower yourself by entering a competition that doesn't exist. Instead, evolve. You don't defend your identity. You outgrow it. You raise the standard so high so quickly that by the time they replicate who you were, you've already become someone else. You become a moving target, shifting, sharpening, ascending. While they chase your shadow, you become uncatchable. This is how you destroy someone who tries to become you, not with confrontation, but with transformation. You diversify your influence. You sharpen your voice. You don't sit still long enough to be copied. Every version of you becomes temporary, a stepping stone, not a destination. And you never speak their name, because the moment you acknowledge them, you give them weight. You imply there's a race, and Machiavelli would never do that. When someone tries to steal your image, let them, because the more they cling to who you were, the more the world realizes they have no path of their own. They're a replica, not a rival. The crowd will see it. The difference between the origin and the imitation is always clear. Your evolution becomes their exposure. Your momentum becomes their downfall. And the silence with which you ascend makes their mimicry look desperate. So you don't chase imitators. You leave them behind. You don't compete in their game, you change the sport. And when they finally realize they can't keep up, they won't just be behind you. They'll be erased by your progress. Because in the end, the one who evolves faster doesn't just win, he makes the original untouchable. Some enemies don't scream or provoke. They don't imitate or slander. They dismiss you. They look down on you with a smug smile, convinced you are beneath them. They see you, but only as background noise. And in that condescension, they expose their deepest weakness, pride. Arrogant people are blind to the quiet. They underestimate silence. They mistake humility for irrelevance. And that is where your power begins. Because when someone believes they're untouchable, they stop preparing. They stop adapting up. They stop watching. And while they rest in the comfort of being superior, you build. Quietly, relentlessly, without seeking applause. Not for revenge, not to prove anything, but because growth is your nature. You don't want to destroy them, you simply want to outgrow what they think you are. This is the most elegant form of collapse. You never take their crown. You build a throne of your own. You create results, earn respect, gain influence. And when the room begins to shift, when heads start turning your way, the arrogant feel it first. It's not the sound of your voice that shakes them. It's the gravity of your presence. They begin to speak louder, trying to reclaim the spotlight. But it's too late. They're no longer the center. They're just another voice in the crowd. Because when people see a man who was once overlooked now being sought out, respected, even followed, the ego of the proud begins to fracture. And here's what Machiavelli knew. Ego is fragile. The proud can't exist without applause. The moment they sense they've lost the room, they panic. Not visibly, but inwardly. You'll see it in their shifting eyes, their tightened jaw, the way they try to remind everyone of who they once were. But you say nothing. You don't mention their name. You don't compete for approval. You simply keep rising. Because your presence is no longer reactive. It's magnetic. And that's what breaks them. They didn't lose to a rival. They lost to someone they ignored. Someone who moved past them so gracefully that it wasn't even war, it was evolution. And now they sit with the most bitter truth of all: you were never beneath them. You were just becoming someone they'd never reach. Some defeats leave a bruise. Others leave a scar. But the most powerful form of destruction isn't physical, reputational, or even social, it's existential. It's when your enemy realizes they never mattered, not in your story, not in your rise, not even in your memory. Machiavelli understood this with surgical clarity. The deepest collapse doesn't come from being attacked, it comes from being forgotten. When someone tries to destroy you, whether through betrayal, manipulation, or sabotage, their deepest fantasy is to leave a mark on your life. They want to define your downfall. They want to know they got under your skin, stole your peace, shattered your name. But what happens when you don't react? When you rise anyway? When you speak of them not with anger but with indifference? That's the moment you crush their identity. Because you don't just remove them from your life. You remove their meaning. When others bring them up and you simply say, "I haven't thought about them in a while," or "hope they're doing okay," not with sarcasm but with calm neutrality, the world sees something they weren't expecting. You've moved on so completely that even the conflict is beneath you. And that's what delivers existential defeat. They didn't just fail to destroy you, they failed to even register as a threat. Their words weren't strong enough to stay. Their presence wasn't deep enough to leave a dent. And now they aren't remembered as a rival, but as a phase, a lesson, a passing character in a story that was never really about them. This kind of power doesn't come from ego, it comes from evolution. You grew so far past the war that the battlefield disappeared behind you, and the ones who tried to chain you down are left alone in the prison they built for someone who no longer exists. That is the silent crescendo of Machiavellian destruction. Not blood, not scandal, but erasure. You don't end them. You outlive the need to. And in doing so, you leave them with nothing, not even the satisfaction of being remembered. because in the end, the cruelest revenge is not fury, it's irrelevance. The most powerful people in the world don't raise their voice. They don't post revenge quotes. They don't threaten or explain. Why? Because they understand a fundamental truth that Machiavelli mastered. You don't send a message, you become it. When someone tries to hurt you, to humiliate you, to pull you down into the mud, the world waits for your response. But if you respond, you've stepped into their world. You've lowered your frequency. You've acknowledged the existence of a rivalry that never deserved your energy to begin with. The higher path is harder. It's quieter, but it's final. You move in silence, not out of fear, but out of focus. You don't mention them. You don't retaliate. You ascend. You elevate your environment, your results, your presence until you're breathing in a space they can no longer access. You don't destroy them by tearing them down. You destroy them by continuing to rise in such a way that their efforts to stop you look absurd in hindsight. You no longer share the same field. While they chase attention, you build legacy. While they gossip, you create impact. While they obsess over being seen, you make moves that can't be ignored. And the people who once watched the drama unfold, they begin to shift their focus. Not because you asked them to, but because your silence, your evolution, your refusal to fight small battles has made something undeniable. You've become untouchable. Machiavelli never taught revenge through noise. He taught dominance through distance. When your name is mentioned in rooms they can't enter, when your influence reaches people they'll never meet, when your calm success whispers louder than their chaos ever could, the gap becomes too wide to bridge. That's when they realize they weren't even part of the final chapter. Because when you become the message composed, elevated, emotionally clean, you communicate something far more lethal than words ever could. You no longer exist in my world. And that is the final stroke of Machiavellian mastery, not to crush someone with rage, but to rise so far above them that they collapse from the weight of your absence. In a world obsessed with noise, the greatest power you can develop is restraint. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone who tries to diminish it. You don't need to react to every insult rumor or attempt to drag you down, because real strength is not reactive, it's strategic. Machiavelli's greatest lesson isn't about manipulation, it's about clarity. Clarity of presence, clarity of identity, clarity of purpose. When you stop defending yourself and start embodying your values, you become a mirror that exposes others without effort. The more composed you remain, the more chaos reveals itself in the people who tried to shake you. Let them talk. Let them accuse. Let them copy. You don't need to chase. You don't need to explain. You only need to build a life so solid, so elevated, that their noise can't reach it. That is the ultimate revenge, becoming someone so unbothered, so deeply rooted in your mission, that your silence becomes a storm. Apply this in your daily life. Don't rush to react. Withdraw from drama without bitterness. Speak through your actions. Make them feel your absence more than your anger. And remember, the man who says nothing but keeps moving forward becomes unstoppable. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs this mindset, and hit that subscribe button, because we're not just building knowledge here. We're building a new way of showing up in the world, calm, precise, and untouchable.